They say childhood is a fever dream, a blur of primary colors and the smell of grass clippings. But if you look closer at those old Polaroids, there's always something in the shadows. Something that didn't make sense when you were 7, but keeps you awake at 30. We grew up in a world of Dantigo in the basement, and it's just the wind. We accepted those lies because we had to. We were small, and the world was vast. But the thing about secrets is that they don't stay buried. They just wait for us to grow tall enough to reach the top shelf where the truth was hidden. Tonight, we're looking back. I've gathered 5 accounts from people who finally pieced together the fragments of their past. These aren't just ghost stories. They are the moments when the veil of innocence was ripped away, revealing a reality far more terrifying than any monster under the bed. Pull the curtains, dim the lights. Let's talk about the secrets we weren't supposed to find out. I grew up in a sleepy suburb in Ohio, the kind of place where every lawn looked like it was manicured with a pair of scissors. My father was obsessed with his roses. He spent every Saturday in the back acre, a dense patch of woods behind our property that he defenced off. He told me it was a wildlife sanctuary and that the soil there was too delicate for a child, as heavy footsteps. I remember watching him through the kitchen window. He'd carry heavy black industrial bags into those woods, sweating through his undershirt even in the brisk October air. Sometimes, he'd come back with dirt under his fingernails that he couldn't tea-scrub clean for days. Once, I found a small silver locket near the gate. When I showed it to him, his face went a shade of gray I'd never seen before. He told me it belonged to my grandmother who passed away, and he snatched it so hard his knuckles turned white. I spent 20 years thinking my dad was just a loner, a man who loved the earth more than people. After he died last year, I had to sell the house. The buyers wanted a pool, so they brought in the heavy machinery to clear the back acre. I was there when the excavator hit something solid. It wasn't a route, it was a rusted metal footlocker. Then another, then a third. The police didn't find my grandmother's jewelry. They found the trophies of 12 missing women from 3 different states, dating back to 1994. My father wasn't tending to roses. He was tending to a graveyard. Every time he tucked me in and kissed my forehead with those dirt-stained hands, he had just finished burying a piece of someone's daughter. The wildlife he was protecting was the monster living inside of him. In my house, the telephone was a sacred object. It sat on a mahogany table in the hallway, its long coiled cord reaching into the shadows. My mother had one rule: if the phone rings after midnight, nobody touches it but her. I remember lying in bed, the walls of our 1920s craftsman home, thin enough to hear the house breathing. Ring, ring. It would happen at exactly 12:03 a.m. I'd hear the floorboards groan as my mother hurried down the hall. Her voice was always a hushed, desperate whisper. "Not yet," she'd say. "Please, he's just a boy. Give us more time." I asked her once who was calling. She looked at me with eyes that seemed to be searching for something behind me. "Just the bill collectors, honey," she'd say, her hand trembling as she stroked my hair. "Go back to sleep." I grew up thinking we were just poor. I thought the bill collectors were the reason we moved every 2 years. Always in the middle of the night, always leaving our furniture behind. Years later, after my mother's funeral, I found a hidden compartment in her old sewing kit. Inside was a stack of newspaper clippings from a town in Oregon I'd never heard of. The headline read, "Local cult leader disappears with infant son. Remaining members vow retribution." There were no bill collectors. The midnight calls weren't about money. They were from the people who believed I belonged to them, a chosen child born into a debt that could only be paid in blood. My mother didn't move us to escape poverty. She moved us to stay one step ahead of a kidnapping. Every she and every go to sleep was her trying to hide me from a world that saw me as a messiah or a sacrifice. My Aunt Margaret lived in a house that smelled like lavender and old paper. She was a reclusive artist, or so my parents said. When I stayed with her, we played a game called Quiet Statues. "If you hear a car in the driveway that isn't mine," she'd whisper, her eyes wide and playful, "you have to run into the floor-to-ceiling wardrobe in the hallway. You have to be a statue. No breathing, no blinking. If you win, we get ice cream." I loved that game. I remember sitting in the dark of that wardrobe, smelling the cedar wood, heart thumping. I'd hear the heavy front door open. I'd hear heavy boots on the hardwood, not Aunt Margaret's soft slippers. I'd hear a man's voice, low and demanding, walking right past the wardrobe. Sometimes he'd stay for an hour. Sometimes he'd bang on the walls. I always won the game. I always got my ice cream. I realized the truth when I was looking through a true crime documentary about the East Side Enforcer, a high-ranking mob enforcer from the 80s. There was a photo of my Aunt Margaret only. Her name wasn't Margaret. She was the star witness who had gone into hiding after testifying against the syndicate. The man in the house wasn't a guest. He was a federal marshal. And the times I heard shouting, those were the times the wrong cars had pulled into the driveway. My Quiet Statues game wasn't a game at all. It was a survival drill. Aunt Margaret wasn't an artist. She was a woman marked for death, using a childish innocence to keep me from screaming while hitmen checked the perimeter of our lives. We had a cellar in our farmhouse in Vermont that stayed locked with a heavy padlock. My grandfather, a stern man who smelled of tobacco and wood smoke, told me a hummingbird lived down there. It's a special, giant bird, he'd say, leaning in close. It needs the dark to stay calm. If you open that door, the light will scare it and it'll fly away and never come back. You don't want to lose the hummingbird, do you? I'd sit by the cellar door for hours, listening. I could hear a faint, rhythmic thumping and a high-pitched electronic whine. Whir-thump, whir-thump. I imagined a magnificent, iridescent bird, wings beating faster than the eye could see, trapped in the cool dark. I felt sorry for it, but I was too afraid to lose the magic. When Grandpa passed away, I was 18. I inherited the farm. The first thing I did, driven by a decade of curiosity, was take a bolt cutter to that padlock. The smell hit me first, not birds, not feathers. It was the sterile, metallic scent of a hospital. There was no bird. In the center of the room, powered by a series of car batteries and a jury-rigged generator, was an old industrial-grade iron lung, and inside it was a woman. She was skeletal, her skin like parchment. She wasn't a bird. She was my Aunt Clara, the daughter the family had told everyone died of polio in 1955. Grandpa couldn't afford the hospital bills, and he couldn't bear to let her go, so he hid her. For 40 years, she lived in that cellar, her world reduced to the rhythmic whir-thump of a machine. The hummingbird wasn't a magical creature. It was the sound of a woman being kept alive in a tomb by a father who loved her too much to let her die, but not enough to let her live. My mother used to set a place at the table for Leo. "Leo is your twin brother," she'd tell me, her voice airy and sweet. "He's just very shy. He likes to sit in the chair next to you. Don't sit on him." I grew up talking to the empty air. I'd share my toys with Leo, tell him about my school day, and even leave half of my cookies on his plate. My father would just stare at his newspaper, his jaw tight, never acknowledging the empty chair. I thought it was a quirk, a beautiful way to keep a memory alive of a brother who perhaps died at birth. One day, when I was 12, I found a photo in the back of a drawer. It showed two toddlers playing in a plastic pool. One was me. The other was a boy who looked exactly like me. But there was something wrong. My mother was holding the other boy, Leo, with a grip so tight her fingers were digging into his arm. I asked my dad about the photo when my mom was out. He broke down. He told me that Leo didn't die at birth. Leo was taken away by social services when we were 4 because my mother had episodes. She couldn't distinguish between us, and in her confusion, she had begun to treat Leo like a doll, neglecting his needs because she thought he was the spirit half of me. The realization was a cold bucket of water. I wasn't playing with a ghost or an imaginary friend. I was being raised by a woman who had been legally barred from seeing her other son. A woman who was using me to hallucinate the child she had nearly killed. Every time I talked to the empty chair, I was participating in my mother's psychosis, helping her pretend that the family she destroyed was still whole. We spend our childhoods trying to understand the world, only to spend our adulthoods wishing we could go back to the version of the world we thought we knew. The gardener, the phone calls, the statues, the hummingbird, and the twin. They weren't just stories. They were the shadows of a reality that was too heavy for a child to carry. But now the lights are on, the secrets are out, and the question is, once you know the truth, can you ever really go home again? Or does the house just feel like a collection of hollow walls and buried things? If you have a story, a memory that didn't make sense until you were older, share it in the comments. We're all just trying to piece our pasts together. Before you go, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have many more secrets to uncover.